Thank you, Madam Chair. And now we'll turn to the ranking member of the full committee, Senator Collins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's great to be here with you and the ranking member, and appreciate it. Secretary Yellen, I want to talk with you about the consequences of the decision that was made by Treasury in consultation with the Federal Reserve and the FDIC to use the systemic risk exception in the Federal Deposit Insurance Act to insure all of the deposits of Silicon Valley Bank. Last Wednesday, the new CEO of this bank held a conference call for concerned clients, and he urged them to return all of their deposits to the bank. And here's what he said on that call, and I'm going to quote it. "There is no safer place in the U.S. banking system to put your deposits," end quote. I'm very troubled by that comment because it invites deposit flows from well-managed, prudently invested community banks to a bank that was poorly managed, that took excessive risks. And it seems to me, by guaranteeing all of the deposits, that you're creating a situation where they are immune from losses, draw in deposits from well-managed banks in a way that puts the well-managed community bank at a competitive disadvantage. So I guess my question to you is, how is this fair?
Well, look, we invoke this systemic risk exception because Silicon Valley Bank had experienced a calamitous run, a run that was so enormous that it overwhelmed the liquidity of this bank, its ability to arrange liquidity. And it created the potential for fear about the safety of uninsured depositors in many other banks, and a failure to protect those who were uninsured depositors in this bank at the time it was put into receivership would have led to fears by uninsured depositors at many other banks who really have no easy way of knowing what the status of their banks are and whether or not their funds are at risk. It risked contagion throughout the banking system. We invoke this exception in order to try to contain the contagion that seemed to all of us to be inherent in these uninsured depositors being wiped out or severely haircutted. So it wasn't a question of protecting that bank or that group of uninsured depositors, but rather the implications for the broader banking system because of the contagion potential.
Well, I want to switch to related but different topics, but to me, it creates a situation where you're rewarding very wealthy depositors and you're creating the need for a special assessment that's going to be imposed on those well-managed community banks that didn't take those risks. And from what the bankers I've talked to tell me, the majority of their depositors fall under the $250,000 limit, while at Silicon Valley Bank, the opposite was true. But let me follow up on a point that Senator Hagerty made. He asked you about the level of FDIC insurance. I remember in 2008 when it was raised from $100,000 to $250,000 during that financial crisis. Now, some of our colleagues, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, has recommended that we raise it to $2 million or even up to $10 million. Do you agree with that?
You know, what I'm focused on right now is trying to stabilize the banking system, and I know our banking system to be sound, and I think right now we need to focus on improving the confidence of the public that we do have a sound banking system. And we can debate in the days ahead whether or not $250,000 is the right level for deposit insurance, or whether that system should be changed in some way. I'm not going to weigh in on it. I believe there's plenty of time to have reasoned discussions about that. For now, I want to use the tools that we do have at our disposal to improve confidence and make sure that banks that are faced with deposit outflows have adequate access to liquidity. The steps that the Federal Reserve took in the aftermath of that bank failure to make liquidity more broadly available to support deposits, that's an important step that went with the steps that we took as well.
Let me very quickly switch to a different issue. You said in your statement that the IRS is answering 1 million more calls than last year. That sounds good, but the fact is that the Inspector General for Tax Administration calculates their own caller response figure based on the data they collect from the IRS. And for this filing season through March 4th, the Inspector General calculates that the IRS has only responded to 52% of calls, and that if you add together both automated calls and calls answered by an IRS customer service representative, that the number of calls that are answered declines to even more, to only 29% of the calls are answered by an IRS customer service representative. So I hope we will follow up and try to get to the bottom of that. I can tell you, based on the casework in my offices in Maine, and I have 6 offices, that they are having an extremely difficult time getting answers from the IRS.
Senator, I would be glad to look into that. I'm not aware of the report that you just mentioned. We have been tracking on a weekly basis the IRS's performance during this tax season, and it has been running between 80 and 90%. That's a very different number than you mentioned, and I would be glad, I will ask my staff to try to reconcile that discrepancy. But I personally promised that this tax season that, so I don't know if are you talking about the entire year or since the tax season opened?
Tax season through March 4th, and it's a report by the Inspector General for Tax Administration.
I will look into that because I've been told its average is 85%, in line with the promise that I personally made.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you. Thank you. Senator Heinrich.
Thank you,